Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. This is the regular SIG Network call. It is Thursday, September 12th, and we are governed by the Code of Conduct, as usual, which basically boils down to don't be a jerk. So please don't be a jerk. That said, we seem to have a pretty light agenda today. We've got some triage, we got some talk about the 132 release, and a couple of issues to maybe look at. So that said, shall we jump into triage? I'll drive triage. Not that many issues this week, not many new ones anyway. Give me a moment. Window. Oh, I should not share this same Zoom window. 1 second. That will end up infinity mirroring. Now let's do share window. Make sure I get the right one. Can you all see my window? Yes?
Yep.
All right. Yep. Let's start with newest to oldest. DNS-A record for pod with headless service may be delayed. It looks like Antonio's all over this. It looks like it might be just a contract issue, Antonio.
The problem is that with Kind, we have now network policies, and there is a bug in the kernel that impact DNS. And I thought that was the same, but this person was doing testing and more things, and he found out he has packet drops. So most likely the problem is packet drops and contract entries. So assign to me, and I will talk with the person.
Okay. I think it raises an interesting question. Can we do better? I know in the past we've talked about, is there a way that we could clear DNS contract records sooner instead of leaving them around to just time out for like whatever it is, 3 minutes, 30 minutes?
My question is somebody was talking.
I was going to say in OpenShift, we actually create IP tables, NF tables rules, calling the no track target on all DNS requests, which basically says never bother to create contract entries for DNS.
How do you do responses?
Because you run a DNS resolver in each node, right?
Yes, but I'm not sure that's.
It's not you cannot do NAT if you delete the contract entry. If you do no track, you cannot do
you get a weird foreign response, right? If you get a response at all.
Maybe the rule only ends up applying to upstream DNS and not to the pod to core DNS.
That could be too. Yeah, we've talked a lot in the past about could we use no track more cleverly to be more efficient with contract records, and we've never really cracked that open. I think there's still an open issue that says, hey, if you can figure out how to do it, we'd be open to it, but nobody's tackled it. I think there's also a way though to set a contract timeout per connection, isn't there? Like I seem to recall reading that, but I never followed up on it. Like if we know something is DNS, could we set a shorter timeout, like on the order of tens of seconds instead of hundreds of seconds?
But that is mitigating the problem. The problem is that for each request we send, I don't remember, 4 or 5 requests.
Well, I mean that's the NDOT's problem, and that's the next issue in our queue. But I mean, yeah. So we amplify the problem. But if we knew that there was only one response, for example, if we knew that there was only one response requested, like there was going to be a request and then a response, could we throw away the contract record after that first response?
But what I have something is you can do a better local cache and know exactly the path and reply directly. So that's what language is saying. If you have the resolver in each node and this resolver is very light, you don't even have to bother to put the DNS as a service distributed, right? I mean, why you are going to query a service DNS, right? Assume only the internal DNS
Oh,
queries.
you mean if kubelet configures every pod to talk to the node's IP address instead of talking to a service IP?
No, to cache or to resolve all the DNS locally in each node.
Right, but that resolver, the DNS mask or whatever you're running, either runs as a pod or it runs as a thing on the node outside of Kubernetes, right? So you need to give it, you need to tell each pod, who do you ask? What is your name server? And it's either a service IP, which is what we do most of the time today, or you give it your node IP, I guess.
Yeah, but that's the thing is the if you run as a pod, you know the DNS unless the people configure a different thing. Well, those people is screwed anyway. But for
I mean, you can run it as a daemon set in host network and then give it. Oh, you can't do localhost. Yeah. Anyway, we don't need to solve it here, but the question I wanted to ask was specifically around UDP. If we have the right mechanisms, and that's a big if, I don't really know. If we have the right mechanisms to set a timeout or to set an expected response count or something, could we enable users to give us a better hint? Like I had another user care customer, I forget if it was a Google customer or just an open source user, who was complaining that they'd filled up contract because they were sending connections on UDP that they never expected a response from. They're like the protocol does not have a response, and if I recall correctly, the contract for DNS for UDP actually times out longer if there's no response. Like it leaves it in a different state, unreplied as opposed to confirmed or something. And so they were complaining, like, I never expect a response. I do not need a contract record for this. How can I indicate that? And we didn't have a mechanism.
So yes, you can modify the contract timeout from an NF tables rule.
Okay.
per connection?
Yep. Per packet,
that's
which I guess is per connection, yeah.
well, right, yeah.
So
That's awesome.
then I will open the question, like, do we do this automatically when we detect port 53, or do we allow it to be configured per service port or something else? Seems like an opportunity to maybe do better. And
so what is when do you apply that? When you need to know that the DNS query was answered, right?
No, you can just say when you do the NAT, you can just say NAT this with these timeouts.
Yeah,
right.
but
So if I have a service that has a no response protocol, suppose as a user, I could add something to my service port that just says, protocol UDP, and special one direction. And then we would know when we set up the NF tables rules or the IP tables, or, whatever the mechanism is that we configure, we don't need to connection track, wait for a response for this. We can just send and forget.
Yeah, but you need it because the next packet needs to be DNAT again.
No, for the protocol in question, you need to DNAT the next one, but you can make a new decision on the next one. There's no, you don't need to send it to the same endpoint.
Okay. So you create a new one each time instead of reusing the same?
Right. You walk the whole table each time, pick a response, send it, throw away the decision, pick a response, send it, or cache it for 3 seconds or 5 seconds or something, not 180 or 3600 or however long we're doing it. Right. Or for DNS, like, is a DNS response after 30 seconds really ever going to be useful? Like, probably not. So, or maybe maybe there's other ways to set a timer. DNS is going to get one reply. Once you get one response packet, just throw it away. Anyway, I think that's an opportunity we should think about, because it's come up often enough, and I know we're spending some time looking at the contract state machine. So maybe, Dan, are you driving the contract work, or is Damon here?
Rayman has the PR already for the reconciler, so just review it. It's really neat.
Yeah, I was looking for you to review it. I don't have the state to review the Netlink library, so if you are happy with it, then I'm happy with it. But
No,
aside from that,
that already merged. He
oh, okay,
said
great,
the
excellent.
second part is now. Uh, well, I think that
Anyway,
we are.
let's take the issue. We can take it to this bug number 127259, or we can open a new issue to discuss. I'll make a note after the call that we should discuss this topic. Let's move on for triage. Support default DNS NDOTs in kubelet. So this has come up a couple times in the past. It looks like they're asking for a cluster-wide default DNS config, or maybe namespace-wide default DNS config. And in the past, we've always said, no, you can do that with a webhook or eventually a mutating admission policy. Are we still in that camp? I don't feel like we need a new resource for this.
Scroll back to the top. Why do they want this?
I'm a little skeptical of this, but or if they have 100,000 node cluster, I would love to hear about it. Whoever, if you submitted this bug and you're watching this call or this recording, please call me. I would love to talk to you about your hundreds of thousands of nodes cluster.
No, but the thing is, what they are requesting is to use the config file as a result.conf template. So they just want to put something and modify the. And there is an option that the users can have their own result.conf, because you start with this and then you start with all the weird options that result.conf has, and we need a flag for each of them.
I'm not sure I followed.
Go
ahead.
The kubelet generates a result.conf based on
Right.
on different options, right?
Right.
And what they want is to have use the kubelet config to parameterize the result.conf. So what they are asking is, oh, I want to use my default result.conf with n.2. So
Yeah. So my transmogrification of this is we already have a per pod DNS config stanza. They want a default for that.
Yeah, but they don't want to use the webhook because that's why they explain it. We don't want to.
I get that they don't want to use. Nobody wants to use a webhook.
I don't see this as they want a default for the pod thing, though. I mean, the kubelet has a set of defaults before it applies the pod, and they just want to change it at the kubelet level, right? Like that would be a kubelet configuration. We already allow configuring some other parts of result.conf in kubelet's config, don't we?
Do we?
Which ones? No, we don't allow. What
we allow you? You can point to a different resolve conf.
Yeah,
you
that's
point
why
to any
I'm
file
saying.
you want.
That's why Paco and I are telling him, if you want to have a lot of control, you create your result.conf and you tell the kubelet, use this result.conf.
But kubelet will still, when we create the pods resolve conf, we will still set ndots to 5 by default. I think that's fixed, unless you override it at the pod.
Or I misread the code, but I think that the one that I linked, that only goes if you hit the there is a constant that is n.dot default. It's in my comment. I may be wrong, but I think that you only use the default if you don't. You see?
I would have to go. I'd have to go back and look at the code. I remember like writing some of this, and the intention was that ndots was fixed. So if it's not, if you use a different resolve conf and you get a different configuration, that wasn't.
But if I give you a result.conf, why are you going to modify my result.conf to use your ndots?
Because kubelet is setting up its Kubernetes opinionated configuration, which includes ndots 5.
Well, somebody went beyond you and changed that because I don't think.
Okay.
I
okay.
You need to check, but
All right. Okay, cool. Well, the discussion I wanted to have was I still don't think we want to add a per cluster or per namespace resource to configure DNS for pods, especially if mutating admission policy lands in the next release or two. That will be a better way than a webhook and more general. I saw something pop up in chat, but I didn't get a chance to look at it.
You
Okay.
mean that use the pod DNS config with the mutating?
Yeah, just set a mutating admission policy that says for every pod that arrives, if you don't already have a pod DNS config, here's your pod DNS config, n.1, right?
And you can do that?
Yeah.
And
Well,
you can do that per namespace too? Can
yeah,
I say? Yeah?
MAP is pretty flexible in what it binds to. So I'm 99% sure you can do it per namespace, and you can do pretty much any mutation you want in there. I think it's alpha or maybe even pre-alpha still, but I know Joe and CC are working on it. So it's a direct response to everybody hates webhooks. So validating admission policy is in, and that seems to be great. People are really happy with it so far. So MAP would be the follow-on. It's a little more complicated though. All right, I'll respond here too because I think it's an interesting one. Let's move on. Race condition of kubelet kube proxy may cause short ingress broken when lost connection. I did not read this issue yet. Does anybody have context? Antonio, of course.
There is a thing that got fixed last release. There is a node controller that has a default time of 40 seconds. That is the one that checks the node is alive.
Right.
I don't know exactly. And there
Right.
is the HTTP2 default values of client Go that if a connection goes idle, it takes 45 seconds. So the problem is if some connection from the node to the control plane got stale, the client doesn't retry until 45 seconds. The problem is that at the 14th second, this controller is going to say, oh, this node is not alive. I'm going to put it not ready. So in this gap of 5 seconds, the node goes from the not ready to ready. And this is an issue with the previous problem, okay? And what happens to this user, if I remember correctly, is that they have a similar problem, and they don't want when the node goes ready and recover the connectivity to flap the state because that breaks their traffic. So they want to say, oh, the node was not ready, it connected, and say, I was always ready.
So they don't want the pod to be marked unready, even though the node is marked unready?
But that only happens when the node reconnects. It's a I mix it two things. I mix it two things. So the problem is the node goes unready. Nothing happens. The traffic comes to the node, is working.
Right.
The problem is when it reconnects, I think that the pod state changes because the node went unready, so the controller marks the pods unready and then ready again. And this makes traffic disruption.
But so the controllers should happen async to the node. Like once the node stops heart beating for, I think it's 40 seconds, like you said, then all the pods are marked.
The thing is, now I got it. I got it now.
Okay.
The kube proxy gets first, and the node, the control plane already marked the node unready and the pods unready. So the kube proxy gets first to the reconnection and sees the endpoints unready. So the node is disconnected. It's working.
Right.
Pods are running there. The
right.
control plane detects the node disconnected and say all of these pods in this node state unknown. I'm going to put it as unready. Okay.
Right.
Then the node recovers connectivity, and the
Right.
first to get to the control plane is the queue proxy, and the queue
Right.
proxy goes there and see, oh, these endpoints are unready. I'm going to drop the rules. And
Even though they're local endpoints.
But the endpoints are unready, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
sure.
he can solve that with the external traffic. Well,
even with external traffic policy, even with proxy terminating endpoints, we didn't follow through. Proxy terminating endpoints will choose terminating endpoints if that's all that's available, as long as they're ready. If they're not ready, we will not choose them. We never had that fourth fallback.
but he can put the unready always ready thing. What is the name of the
Publish
option in
unready
the service?
endpoints, or
Yeah, that one.
yes, I guess so.
I don't know. Somebody has to read that.
Okay.
But if he does the always ready, publish unready, he will get what he wants.
Well, he'll get a whole lot more, but
What talking? Look, if you have daily disruptions between the nodes and the control plane of more than 1 minute,
yeah.
that's not the cluster needs that.
Okay. I feel like reading and responding to this one too, but I don't want to assign them all to myself this week. So if somebody wants to look at this one, please feel free to follow up here too. Let's push ahead. We're already way past time. So I'll make this the last one. Network port groupings. I've not read this one yet. A group of ports that are reusable by many policies. Oh.
They want to create templates based on objects.
I think the answer here is that admin network policy will make it so that they only need to create a single policy object rather than needing to create lots of duplicate network policies that all say the same thing.
I think that's probably true. That's what this looks like. Do you want to respond? Was that Dan? I only heard the voice.
Sure, just sign. Yeah.
Or Stoikos or somebody is here? No? Okay, let me stop here. Stop sharing. Cool. So much for a light agenda today. What's rest on the agenda? Next up was 132 release dates. It didn't say who put this on there. Was that Antonio, Shane?
It was me.
Do you want to just talk through the dates?
I didn't check the dates. I think that
You
one was
want me to
close
do it?
to
I'll do it.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
remember.
So we're in the 132 release cycle now. For everybody who's got KEPs or features in flight. Officially, the start of the release cycle was this week, this Monday. People have been sending KEPs before that anyway. It's fine. In fact, it's encouraged. Please send KEPs whenever they're ready. Enhancements freeze, which means all KEPs must be in and approved and PRR'd, is Friday, the 11th of October. That is 1 month, just under 1 month from now. So if you have a KEP that you want to get into or advanced in 132, please make time in the next 2 weeks to get on this KEP so you do not drop KEPs on top of us in the last week. I swear this time, if you send me a KEP in the last 7 days of the window, I am not going to look at it. A new KEP. I will only accept KEPs in the next 2 weeks of the release cycle. After that, it will be finishing the ones that made it in. So if you need me to look at your KEP, and this is my own policy, and Dan and everybody else can have their own policies if they like, my personal policy, please send it to me in the next 2 weeks, or you risk not getting in, because the last 2 weeks of the KEP window are always a hellscape of last second changes and reviews. Enhancements freeze. Code and test freeze is just under a month after that. So beginning of first week of November, just before KubeCon. That is the code and test freeze. Notable different this time, code and test freeze is the same date. There's no longer acceptable to check in the code with crappy tests and then say, I'll fix the test during the extended test window. They've extended the whole window, but said code and tests have to go in together. This was at the request of lots of people who were reviewing stuff. So please take advantage of that extra week or so in the code and test freeze window, but make sure your tests are rock solid. Docs freeze comes a couple of weeks after that, and the release target is one month after KubeCon. So second week of December, just before the Christmas holidays, because cutting a release before the holidays is always a good idea. Questions on the release cycle or what you need to do to catch up to it? Okay, everybody out there who's got a KEP, please get them in and we'll talk about them. I've been going through KEPs this week. It's been very interesting to ping up a bunch. We've got a bunch of old ones that have been sitting sort of for a while that need either an owner or somebody to put their shoulder into it and really push. Okay. I put on the agenda a particular feature request, and I don't really remember why I put it on the agenda. I was reviewing old feature or old issues, and well, maybe this one needed a retriage, and I put it on the agenda. Specifically, it's adding an enabled field to network policy. And if I recall, if I'm looking at the history correctly, we were all kind of okay with the idea of adding it, but nobody was on it. Is that right? Dan, do you remember? I see you added this extra network policy link.
Nadia added that actually. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seemed like not an important enough feature to be worth spending a lot of time on, but also not something to definitely throw away.
So help wanted sort of feature. If somebody did it, we won't say no, but you or I or Nadia is not going to make time for it in the near future.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it doesn't seem too complicated, so I'm happy to take it.
If you would like to look at it, it is linked in the agenda 112560. I will. It seems like it'll be easy because it's just an API field. Network policy is notoriously tricky because all the implementations are out of tree. So if you do this, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. You popped into my head when I looked at this issue. It seemed like a good next bite for you. You will have to run around a little bit and poke at the implementations and say, hey, we want to add this. Is this something that you could support? And B, is this something you would support if we added it? Because it's terrible if we add it and then nobody supports it, or if it takes 2 years for Cilium or somebody to come along and actually do the thing that we wanted them to do. Nadia's here. I see a hand up. Go ahead, Nadia.
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to say, first of all, check out the comments on the issue I linked. You may get an idea about which implementations think what based on that. And another thing I couldn't quite figure out based on the issue description, what is the actual reason to add this field, to be honest. So we are kind of clear about what we want to do, why we want this flag for in the network policy API issue. But in this specific case, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I mean, that will be important, I guess, if you try to actually implement the KEP and everything.
So I hadn't actually looked and seen what the link Nadia added was. That's actually a more complicated thing where people wanted the ability to test what would happen if I added this policy rule without actually adding it. Whereas auditing. The feature request that Tim had linked to is just, I want to be able to turn network policies on and off so that I can have different policies in effect at different times easily.
The use case, as I recall it, and I've heard that from other customers too, was something's going wrong. I want to just one by one turn off the policies until I get back to a sane state, and then turn them back on and figure out what was going on. apparently this is a thing that's doable in other policy languages.
Right, but that assumes that you have explicit denies, right? Like if you turn off individual network policies, you're just going to be getting rid of allow rules for the most part.
Yes. Nadia's hand up.
Yeah, just one more note about the network policy API thing. I think we ended up saying that actually the only API field that we do need for this feature is like similar dry run, disable, call it whatever you want kind of field. So it's not potentially that far away from each other.
So Adrian, it may turn out to be a big bite after all, but you know, jump in with both feet.
I'll jump in and I'll
You're not
DM
stuck
someone.
with it, yeah.
Worst case is you say, nope, back away, not mine.
Cool. I'll take a look and see what it looks like.
Okay. That next on the agenda, Rob.
Yeah, mine is real quick. I just wanted to, so last SIGNet meeting, we monopolized a lot of time running through Gateway API 1.2 changes at a high level. There was some good feedback there, which we've addressed since. And I think we're ready to go ahead and get a release candidate out there. I've linked two things in the agenda. One is a changelog that basically describes the changes that we're putting into 1.2. And then two is a diff of API spec between 1.2 and 1.1. Anyone's welcome to look at either of those, but I think we'll just go with lazy consensus here. If we don't hear anything by Monday, we'll go ahead and release RC1. Cool.
No objection. Okay. That is the end of our agenda. Does anybody have any other hot topics they want to talk about? KubeCon is coming, 2 months. I hope to see everybody there. Maybe in the next meeting or two, we'll start working on our SIG lunch that we always put together. Are we doing a maintainers track network deep dive or something? Did somebody sign up for that? I lost track of it.
Yes. I helped coordinate we have two maintainers tracks that I'm aware of. We have a Gateway API one, and then we have a main SIG network one.
Excellent.
Dan and Antonio are going to do it, and then we're actually getting somebody from network policy who hasn't had a chance to do a whole lot of talking for it before that's coming in. His name is I gotta remind myself of his name real quick, actually.
Sean Crampton.
Thank you. And yeah, so that is underway.
Great. Good to hear. I hope I will see a lot of you there. Last note I will make before I turn off the recording. If you have been assigned an issue for triage, please, or if ever you think you might have maybe been assigned an issue for triage, load up GitHub issues for Kubernetes, search for yourself and triage, it needs triage. Remember, if you were assigned triage, it's, do you think this is a real bug? If so, triage accept it. If not, bring it back here for further discussion or respond or try to get more information. You don't have to fix the bug. You just need to help us figure out if it's for real or if it's a dupe or if it's a support request or something else. So please take a look. We've got a handful of issues that are, you know, old and have people assigned to them, but haven't really made any progress. So at some point I'm going to run through and just close them. And I hate doing that when it's just a lack of follow through. So please, if you maybe were assigned, go take a look. That includes me. Take a look and poke those if you can.
Roger that. And then I found the group. So it's Nadia, Sean, Dan, and Antonio are doing it. And if anybody here is interested in having them highlight anything, there's going to be like a section on like what's going on with sub projects and stuff like that. Reach out to us if you'd like, if there's anything like important for a shout out.
Excellent. Okay. Last call. Anybody have anything else they want to talk about? Okay. You all get 20 minutes back. See you in 2 weeks or on the GitHub. Send me those caps.